I'd like to introduce are you the Mistress of Ceremonies for today? Simone Netherlands of Respect for Horses.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much, especially to the press for coming here today and attending our press conference. This is a collaboration of Respect for Horses organization, the Cloud Foundation, and Wild Horse Freedom Federation. My name is Simone Netherlands. I'm a natural horsemanship trainer and the founder of Respect for Horses organization. We came to Salt Lake City today from all different corners of the country because of the BLM Advisory Board meeting that's taking place right next door. The BLM Advisory Board exists to give advice to the BLM on their policies and their strategies in regards to our wild horses and burros. So we are here to advise them on a few things. Our public lands are just that, public. They're not called special interest lands, or lands for sale to the highest bidder, or lands for profit. Yet, the BLM is not listening to any public opinion. There's even a comment period during the advisory board meeting, but all of our comments and input and protests and rallies haven't changed a thing. As a matter of fact, things seem to only be getting worse. The roundup schedule's more aggressive, the contractors more blatantly heartless, the transparency and the public access more restricted, and the deception to the American public more and more obvious. We have been saying it for years, that our wild horses and burros end up in the foreign horse slaughter plants. They tragically go from living the most idyllic lives on our public lands, where they have a legal right to live, and where they are harming no one, to being trucked to the foreign horse slaughter plants in Mexico and Canada, only to end up on a dinner plate in a foreign country. We now have proof that the BLM has sold truckloads of horses sight unseen to a certain Mr. Tom Davis, who's a well-known amongst advocates to be a kill buyer. And Ginger Catherines is going to tell you a little bit more in detail about that. We have documents and contracts showing that over 1,700 horses have been sold to this person since 2002. And everyone knows that no one other than a kill buyer would be interested in truckloads of untamed wild horses sight unseen. The BLM knows full well when they are loading these horses on the trucks, 35 of them on top of each other, they know full well where they are going. Yet they still remain that the horses did not end up in slaughter, while we are here to demand proof. If Tom Davis happened to take those truckloads of wild, untamed horses somewhere other than horse slaughter plants, then all they have to do is show us where they are. The IDs of the horses and their description are on the paperwork. It should be very simple to show us where they are and who they were sold to. These are our taxpayer dollars that are funding this unspeakable cruelty to the last of our remaining wild horses and burros. It cost the taxpayer $75 million to round them up with helicopters and stuff them in filthy holding pens and feed them for the rest of their lives. While they're costing no one a dime, living their lives peacefully on our public lands where they have a legal right to live. We now have over 48,000 wild horses and burros stuffed in long and short-term holding facilities, and that is more than we have left in the wild. The BLM claims that we have 37,000 wild horses and burros left in the wild. Yet they don't really know because there is no accurate, scientific, or recent count of wild horses and burros left on our public lands. So how can you continue to remove this amazing icon of the American West when you truly have no clue how many we really have left? It's completely irresponsible. Horse welfare organizations estimate that in all reality we now have less than 20,000 left in the wild. But let's take the average of those two numbers and say that it is 27,000. That is still a ridiculously low number. Less than 50,000 animals is a species of concern. We have over 1 million elk in America. We're also grazing our public lands. We have over 32 million deer. We don't see anyone concerned with rounding those up with helicopters. Let there be no mistake about it. There is no overpopulation problem of wild horses in burros. There is a very clear law in place. It's a very clear law. It is the Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act of 1971. This law was meant to preserve and protect our wild horses and burros. Yet this law has been scathed, circumvented, and differently interpreted in order to fit the agendas of all the big stakeholders. The big stakeholders are the big mining companies, the welfare cattle ranchers, the oil companies, the water extraction, and the hunting associations. The wild horses and burros are the last priority on anybody's lists. Just like the rainforests of the Amazon are being exploited for their resources, so are our own public lands. The BLM policies are clearly biased and against the horses and burros. There are over 3 million cattle out there on the same acres that the horses are on, and yet they blame the 20,000 wild horses and burros left for deterioration of our public lands. They are highly underestimating the American public. We need a count of exactly how many horses and burros are left out there, even before one more horse is rounded up. The BLM needs to stop selling wild horses sight unseen in truckloads to anyone. The program is unsustainable, it is inhumane, it is unlawful, unscientific, and a despicable waste of our taxpayer dollars. The BLM Advisory Board, that's meeting next door, is supposed to give advice to the BLM as to their policies. But there is really only one piece of advice we would like for them to give to the BLM. Cease and desist all roundups now. Thank you, and that's it for my speech today. And herewith I'm honored to introduce my great friend and wonderful person, Ginger Catherines. She has documented Cloud for over 17 years and made a wonderful PBS documentary about him. And it is the only chronicled wild animal from birth to now, right? In the universe, right? Anywhere.
In our hemisphere.
In our hemisphere. So in our hemisphere. She can be compared to the Jane Goodall, and she's our Jane Goodall for wild horses and burros. So, Ginger Catherines.
Thanks, Simone. Hi, thank you for coming. I know why probably most of you are here from the press, but I'll just say a little bit of a preamble to kind of put the wild horse problem in perspective. Early in the 1900s, there were an estimated 2 million wild horses roaming west, the Great Plains all the way to California. Today, depending on what day you talk to and who you talk to, the BLM estimates about 36,600, I think on their website they report that today. Tomorrow, they could round up 5,000 wild horses in the next month, and they would still report 36,600. So it's the shifting sands of their numbers, and I don't think that, as Simona said, I'm not sure that they know how many are out there. We believe there are fewer than 20,000 wild horses remaining in 10 western states. So it's not just that these animals live in one place. They are spread out over millions and millions of acres of land that was designated for their use in the 1971 Wild Horse and Burro Act. And despite that act, the roundups and the removals continue. An important point to remember is not that there are just these few thousand horses that are roaming in 10 western states, but only about a third of the herds are genetically viable. And Vi Colwriter entered the room, I see, and she's crunched all those numbers and the size of the herds, and I think there's 60-some herds that meet the minimum genetic requirements. And these are not my minimum genetic requirements. These are the genetic requirements of Dr. Gus Cothran, the foremost equine geneticist in the United States. Gus has been working with BLM for many years, and when you read his reports, it's very clear that if we don't lose the horses because they're all removed in a roundup, we're going to continue to see genetic degradation, and eventually that will take the toll, and the herds will disappear. So the massive roundups continue, and the death and destruction with them. As Denise Boble documented on the first day of the antelope gathering in Nevada, horses died of broken legs and broken necks, and in my personal experience, foals have lost their hooves, literally sloughed the hooves off their little feet because they will run far too fast with a helicopter over their heads. They were trying desperately to keep up with their parents. This year, early in the year, my office was alerted to a man named Tom Davis who lives in La Jara, Colorado. I'm from Colorado. La Jara is a little bitty town in the San Luis Valley, and it is within a few miles of Ken Salazar's home ranches. Tom Davis is a person who knows both Ken Salazar and Ken's brother John, who is our Department of Agriculture head in Colorado. The families go back. Davis's parents, I believe, even worked for the Salazar ranches. And the whole Davis situation has arisen because BLM is continuing to remove horses unnecessarily from the range and stockpiling them in both long-term and short-term holding facilities. The short-term holding facilities are animals that are largely adoption age animals. They're usually under the age of 5 years old. Most of the long-term holding horses are horses that are over the age of 10, and they have been passed up, or they have been passed up for adoption at 3 advertised adoptions. And because they have removed far more animals than the adoption program can handle, this stockpiling has gone up year after year. Patty Colbert is with us today, who's with Mustang Heritage Foundation. Without Patty, we would see even more dismal numbers in the adoption. I believe last year there were something like 2,800 horses adopted, and I think probably Patty, through her efforts with the Extreme Mustang Makeover, made up, what, Patty, 1,000 of those perhaps?
Thank you, Ginger, yes.
Yeah, so it's the adoption program is in the tank. It would be even more in the tank without Patty's efforts. And so instead of finding ways to manage the animals on the land, they were removed by the thousands. And the BLM is stuck in this syndrome of managing now the animals off the range. The Wild Horse and Burro Act didn't mean for horses to be managed in holding facilities. The act intended that they would be managed on the range and that the BLM would find ways to keep those herds viable. So what we have are very few viable herds left anymore, very few animals left anymore, and the majority of them, the vast majority, are either in, as Simone said, these rather despicable short-term holding facilities that are feedlot-style facilities. Just recently, Barbara Flores was given pictures by our board member, Tony Moore, who visited the Elm Creek facility in Nebraska. She visited there twice. And those young horses have sled runner feet. And they're rocked back on their feet. It's destroying their ability to even move around. And the young man who runs the facility, he said, we don't have any money or manpower that's given to us to deal with this situation. So you've got an inhumane situation in these short-term facilities. And in long-term, how do we know how many horses are out there? Nobody is allowed to go and inventory. BLM has no data to support the numbers that they say are out there. Are they out there or not? How do we know? We know that truckloads of these horses have been purchased. And we know one of these guys is the La Jara guy, the guy whose ranch is a few miles away from Ken Salazar's ranch. His first contract in 2008, which were both contracts were signed by Sally Spencer, by the way, not contracts, but both of his applications were approved by her. She's in the DC office, and her signature is on these contracts. The information the office is making downstairs I can make available to you. I can let you see the contracts. I can let you see what he said he wanted to use the horses for in 2008. I don't know whether you can guess what he said. Movies. He was going to make movies with the horses. The second contract was approved, or application was approved in 2011. On that one, he says that he's going to sell them eventually to Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana to go in the oil fields to keep the grass down. So he has accumulated, what, something like 1,500 to 1,700 horses. And when those documents arrive, I'd be happy to give the press the documentation on that. So we were alerted about Tom Davis by neighbors in the area and friends of ours, and there was an active investigation going on. People were watching his facility, taking pictures of his facility, driving by his facility, and that's when Dave Phillips came in the picture, and Dave came into my office, and he had the same information that we had. And that was that this one gentleman had been purchasing truckloads of horses over the years. And Tom Davis, let me tell you, drive down to Alamosa, go to a sale auction barn where they sell horses. Tom Davis, since 2002, has been visiting, buying, trucking, and hauling horses for the purpose of slaughter. He's either taken them to Texas, or his operatives had, or he sold them to Dennis Chavez, big killer buyer in the Albuquerque market. It's known by everybody. Everybody knows this is who this guy is, and this is what he does. And he doesn't make any bones about it. He says, hell yes. Well, can you show us the documentation of, who you sold them to? Hell no. I mean, he's just in your face, like I don't have to tell you a thing. And year after year, this has been going on. Until Dave broke the story, the Denver Post published it, ProPublica published it. I didn't want him to publish it. I didn't want him to go to Tom Davis and do the interview, because what we wanted was the DOT numbers, what we wanted was the clear proof that the horses had been transported across the border to Mexico. I mean, we know that's what happened, but the clear documentation does not exist right now, and the case has been broken. I mean, I don't know whether Tom Davis would be stupid enough to buy more horses and put him in his corral that's within a stone's throw of the highway in Lahara, near the high school there, or not. Or whether BLM, I doubt, would ever sell him more horses. And today at the advisory board, they said that they were investigating the situation, which is the first time they've said that. When Tom Gorey, their national spokesperson, was asked whether there was an investigation, he said, I can't comment. So this is the first time it was really substantiated that they were even investigating this guy. But Tom Davis is a symptom. He's a symptom of a horrible, broken program. They've broken every promise to the horses. They've broken every promise to advocates, whether they're 11-year-old kids or old ladies like me. And it's just a very, very sad situation, because I think they're such a dramatic and vital part of our public landscapes. People love to see them. They love to visit them. They love to take pictures of them. They love to write about them. Children send me cartoons and pictures all the time. It's just not right. It's got to stop. Now, what do we do? Do we have yet another congressional oversight hearing? I say yes. Will the BLM just walk in there, waltz in with their stuff, tell them a bunch of stories, and they just say, oh yeah? Because it's so easy. It's so easy to just accept their quick and sometimes dirty, lying stories. It's just too easy. When you delve into the program, it's tough, it's hard, it's complex. There's a lot of issues to deal with. But by gosh, we've got to deal with them, or you know what's going to happen? These animals are being managed to extinction. There is no doubt about it. And unless we do something about it now, members of the press, please investigate some of the things I've told you. And those of you in the audience who can, please do what you are able to do, or we will lose these beautiful animals forever. Thank you. Oh, I can answer this.
We have a question
Oh,
right now.
gosh.
I have a couple of questions.
Well, we're going to have
Wait.
questions.
We have one more speaker.
R.T. Fitch is my friend, colleague, an advocate, bodyguard.
Ball bodyguard.
Yeah, well, bodyguard he is, and one of the most outspoken critics of the BLM. I think he's more disliked than me, and so here he is.
Thank you, Ginger. That's a difficult act to follow. And I think both the advocates, the friends, and also the press can tell that these folks here, and many out here, aren't strangers to standing up in front of the podium, the public or the press, and crying out for the inhumane mismanagement of our national icons at the hands of the BLM. We have even decried bad numbers, poor accounting, the garbled environmental assessments, the junk science that's used to justify the stripping of free-roaming wild horses and burros from their rightful public lands. And likewise, many times at many press conferences and gatherings, along with the advisory board meetings, we have protested the terrifying contract helicopter stampedes that are brutally utilized to herd these fear-crazed horses into awaiting traps, only to be carted off to destinations unknown and fake, that are covertly carried out behind closed doors, where neither the public or the press are allowed to visit or to see. But as you heard here with our first two speakers, we're here for yet another reason to denounce a gruesome act, and that's the cruelty, the potential cruelty of selling off our national icons into the bloody business of horse slaughter. Now, just down the hallway, we heard it this morning, we were in there, they're going to tell you that they don't do that the BLM does not have any part in selling horses into horse slaughter, whether direct or indirectly. I mean, right now they're down there going where no bureaucrat has gone before, and they're screaming all the way from Washington, D.C. to Salt Lake City, hey, we didn't do it. It doesn't happen. And guess what? You don't have any evidence. But it's just not that simple, and we're not that stupid. So a few points to ponder here. Let's kind of wind back a time machine to 2008 during the BLM Implementation Team Conference. There's calls going where the members of the BLM leadership who are presently still in office plotted on varied methods to kill and dispose wild horses and burros due to the high cost of warehousing them. Everything from shooting them in pits, sales to kill buyers, and even an idea to establish a pipeline to usher them off to Denmark for consumption were discussed and documented. These transcripts were brought forward to the public through a FOIA of a wild horse advocate. And I tell you, if you haven't read these yet, they make for great Halloween horror reading. Let's fast forward to September of last year, when here in Utah, the feds picked up 2 men who were suspected of buying 64 horses from BLM long-term holding for the sole purpose of exporting them across the border to Mexico for slaughter. Now in May of this year, during the 4th and final public meeting of the National Academy of Science Wild Horse and Burro Review Committee, Don Glenn, the immediate past division chief of the BLM Wild Horse and Burro program, informed the NAS panel and the horrified public that the simple solution to the wild horse and burro problem is unlimited sale authority. He publicly stated, and I quote here, "It makes no sense for the taxpayers to put out $75 million to take care of a bunch of old horses that nobody wants." I remind you, this is the former head of the department. They should be sold without limitation, and if folks want to protect them because they're afraid they're going to go to slaughter or something, they have every right to purchase them. Thanks, Don. And now, last month, as you heard here, the Tom Davis story. A man who bought 1,700 horses from the BLM. Where are they? It's pretty ugly. And the situation is worse than many believe, because As we said, right now, the Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Board is meeting to advise the BLM on how to mismanage our wild equines, and that hand-picked board is loaded with public supporters, pro-slaughter supporters, cattle grazing interests. All you got to do is walk down there and see the big cowboy. Hunting interests that not only don't have the future safety and welfare of our wild equines in mind, but they quite possibly are plotting to deem the tens of thousands of wild horses that are held in long-term and short-term holding to be sale authority, so as to relieve the fiscal disaster that the BLM has brought upon themselves and this country with their unsustainable roundups and their broken policies for appropriate range management. Today, our heritage, our history, and more importantly, our future is slipping through our fingers as the BLM zeroes out long-standing native herds and renders, as Ginger said, the remaining few genetically unviable, while possibly plotting to butcher, slaughter, and destroy those 45,000 horses they have stockpiled and holding against the will of the public and in clear violation of standing law. Today, as we said, we call for a stop, a moratorium on the BLM's wild horse harvesting machine, so a full and accurate accounting can be made of what is truly left on our public ranges, while an external, and I say external investigation because we did hear an investigation today, but we don't have the details. But we're crying out for an external investigation to be launched into the improper handling, management, and disposition of those horses that are warehoused, again, on private property and behind closed doors where no one else is even allowed to see. And perhaps, as advocates and tax-paying Americans, we should investigate the possibility of bringing the full brunt of law down upon the individuals who have not only stood by and allowed the families of free-roaming wild horses and burros to inhumanely strip from their homes, but those who have been complicit in the ultimate death and slaughter of the innocent. These individuals, be they contractors or government employees, should pay the judicial price for their crimes. It's incumbent upon us to ensure that the voiceless will be vindicated for the bloody violence perpetuated upon them by the potential employees, possible employees, contractors, and associates of BLM. There will be no peace until those individuals are behind bars in a long-term holding corral of their own construction. Then we'll see how they like it. Our motto for today is stop the roundups, expose the slaughter, convict the guilty, and hopefully then the horses, the burros, and the American public can live in peace. We thank you.